Hello everyone, this is Ayhan from GMAT Buddy. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can ace the quant section of the GMAT. And to do that, we're going to solve this problem over here on the screen together. Now, by the end of the video, you will learn how to solve it yourself. But more importantly, you will understand what are the underlying problem-solving skill set required to solve it and how they relate to the three phases of solving any problem, which are understand, present, and execute. Towards the end of the video, I will explain how you can use the official GMAT resources to develop those skills and what other resources you can use if necessary. So let's solve this problem together. And if you want to take a moment, go ahead and then I will start the explanation. Now you will notice that I have these three phases of solving problems. I call them understand, present, and execute. And with present, you can also call it modeling, organization. There's more than one way to present this. And you have over here a section that I call implications. As I'm explaining this problem and as I outline some ideas, I'm going to write down over here on the right hand side some implications that are really important to your preparation. And what I also want to draw your attention to is that these steps, they kind of blend into each other. So it's not a clear-cut separation. And obviously within each phase, there's more than one step. Now, when I look at this problem in the exam, obviously I realize that I'm going to have to spend at least 45 seconds or a minute to read it. So that's really important to remember. So as soon as the foreman opens an empty loading dock in the shipping yard, boxes of apples begin to arrive at a rate of 19 boxes per minute at 5 a.m. Okay, I don't write anything yet. I just need to understand more context and then I'll decide what to write. Every 11 minutes thereon and beginning at 5:07, a truck departs the loading dock with every box of apples that had arrived in the last 11 minutes. Now notice that in the exam, for sure, at least some time has passed, okay? At least 45 seconds. And what's important is that as I'm reading this problem, I ask myself, do I understand what's going on? Do I infer some kind of a model that I can use over here? And in this case, the model that I'll probably use, at least in this case, is rates. Okay, this is at least a rates problem. So we know that at 5:05:07, a truckload departs, and it says that with every box of apples that had arrived. So this is just a lot of information. This is a really dense problem. And obviously, if you have any kind of a weakness in any one of the steps that we're about to take, it just really grows exponentially the amount of time that you need to solve this problem, which means you have to guess and move on. So at 5:07, they all depart, and how many had been shipped? Well, it's 19 boxes per minute for the amount of time since 5 a.m. And so that's 19 times 7. Now, so 19 times 7 boxes have been shipped. You may have the temptation during the test to just say like, okay, you know what 19 times 7 is, and then you actually determine this number, but don't do that yet. What you're trying to do right now is you're trying to understand and you're trying to present. And what you'll realize is that as you present, this reinforces your understanding. So this loop of understand, present, okay, these two reinforce each other. So these are shipped. And now they say that every 11 minutes, in the last 11 minutes, what is the average number of batches? Okay, so now look, there are two models now that have been used, which are the model of rates, okay, and averages. So if I have any kind of a weakness in either, there's just no way I can solve this. So implications, okay, we'll leave this for later. What is the average number of batches of apples that are loaded on each of the trucks that left in the time period if the last truck left before 7:35? So the last truck left at 7:35 or before 7:35, and then the first one had left 5:07, and then after that, every 11 minutes, you have these trucks leaving. So the next one will be at 5:18, and then the one after that at 05, and then another 11, so that's 29. And then over here, whatever's been there has been loaded and shipped. So how many are those? So that's 19 times 11 per minute. So the idea is, the question is, these are shipped, okay, every 11 minutes. How many of those have been shipped? So really, it's a question of how many 11s do I have from here, right? Not counting the one over here because that's already shipped. So from here on in, how many 11s do I have? So that is number properties, okay? We're talking number properties as well. So you see how all these concepts, they just add together and they allow you to understand and present and then maybe ultimately execute. So again, any weakness in any one of those, there's just no way you can do this in on average 2 minutes. So how do I determine how many 11 segments I have there? Well, I know that, okay, from 5:05:07 until 06:07, that is 60 minutes, all right? And then from there at 07:07, that is another 60 minutes. And then I have until 7:35. Well, how many minutes do I have there? That's going to be another 07 to 35. That's going to be 28 minutes. Okay. So another 28 minutes. I just double check from 35, from 27 to 35, that's another 8 minutes. And then, okay, so we have that 28. So we have 148 minutes. How many 11-minute segments are there? Well, I divide by 11, and then I get, there's a 3 and an 8, so that's 3. Okay, so we have 13, right? And then there's a remainder, and I know that there is therefore not another 11-minute segment where another set of boxes have been shipped. So we have, in conclusion, 13 shipments that had how many boxes of apples on each? Well, it's 90 per minute for 11 minutes. So that is the amount that has been shipped after that first shipment. And what they want from us is the average, okay? So I have one shipment that had 19 times 7, and then 13 shipments that had 19 times 11. What is the average? And then I'm going to have to divide by the total number of shipments, which is 1 plus 13. Now you may take a moment in the test to stop and ask yourself, well, do I divide by 1 plus 13? Do I divide by 7 plus 11? How do I know? Well, you have to understand the concept of averages. They're asking us for the average number of boxes. Okay, what is the average number of batches of apples that are loaded on each of the trucks left? So I'm going to have to say, like, I'm going to have to divide by 1 plus 13. So again, the concept of averages needs to be super sharp. Now, one last step. Do I actually have to determine this number? And the answer is no, because I know for a fact that the result is going to be so much closer to 19 times 11 than it is to 19 times 7, because it's weighted so much more heavily towards this number, okay? There are 13 19 times 11 versus 1 19 times 7. So the result is so much closer to this. That is all I have to determine, and then I assess how close it is to the answer choices. And I can say that 19 times 11 is the same as saying 11 20 times, okay, minus 111. So that's 20 times 11, so that's 10 times 11, that's 110. 2 of that, that's 220, and minus 111, and that's going to be 209. So I know that the answer choice is going to be so close to 209, and that is the one I'll choose. So that's how you solve this problem. Now, what are the implications? Now, perhaps the first implication that you've noticed is that I couldn't see all the steps ahead of me. No problem solver, no matter how good they are, can see every single step ahead of them when they're solving a problem. All you know how to do is just take 1 or 2 steps that you can see, and those steps that you can see are a function of how strong your understanding of the underlying concepts are and how strong the basics of math are. And what happens is that you actually take a step and then you see whether the problem begins to unravel. So that's a very important implication, because it means that you shouldn't try to learn ways to solve problems. And it also means that a blueprint or a hack or a trick is never really going to work. Instead, your strategy to improving on the GMAT and your strategy to learning math needs to be the development of underlying skill sets. And so number one, you have to improve your ability to comprehend the English language, because if you can't process information fast enough, there's no way you can solve this problem in on average 2 minutes. Second implication is that the basics of math have to be really sharp, and that's multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. As you can see here, I did long division. If that is really slow, it just extends the amount of time that you require to solve problems exponentially. And more importantly, you won't be able to process the little bits of information fast enough to just see the big picture or see the big vision. It will be just too fast for you and too much information. The third implication is that your understanding of the concepts has to be super sharp. So as you saw over here, I needed at least 3 concepts. I needed to understand rates, I needed to understand averages, I needed to understand number properties. And obviously this understanding and this appreciation is really intuitive. I don't have to think really hard to know that that is the concept that I need to use. And how does that come about? It comes about from a lot of practice. And that is related to the other problem-solving skill set, which is modeling. And that is a really hard one to improve. When you're modeling, what you're trying to do is establishing a relation. You want to say that something equals something else, or this thing is going to result in that. And the only way to develop an experience with modeling is to solve a lot of problems. Here's what makes the GMAT difficult. The official guide is an absolutely essential resource that you can use to develop that skill set, to improve that skill set, but it may not be enough if you're not really good at math. And so what you need to do, therefore, when you're using the GMAT official guide is the following. First, solve problems that are easy or medium by topic. So you're only going to solve number properties, you're only going to solve rates, you're only going to solve percents, etc. And what you need to look for is a level of autonomy in problem solving. if you're solving these problems and you realize that you're able to either solve them correctly on your own, or if you answer them incorrectly, you're able to figure out how to solve them correctly, or if you look at a solution, you're able to understand why that solution is the correct solution, then your level of autonomy is good enough to continue solving these GMAT problems. But if you realize that you have a very low level of autonomy, by that I mean you just don't know how to solve a very large proportion of them, or when you look at the solutions, you realize that you just don't understand what to do, and you realize that you have to go to a lot of forums, and you realize that you have to ask a lot of questions on those forums to understand why a step takes you from one point to the next, it means that you're not ready to extract the most value out of those resources. And instead, what you need to do is solve more basic problems in the underlying principles of math, for example, arithmetic and algebra, solving of linear equations, to develop more autonomy, and then you can return to solving official GMAT problems. And what you see here is a timeline that explains how you should go about preparing for the GMAT and using the official resources. Remember, the resources are, relatively speaking, very few, and so you want to extract the most amount of value that you want from those resources. And it is related to that idea of autonomy. You want to be quite autonomous as you're solving those problems in order that you are able to work on your efficiency to really see that change in your score. So when you start, you're going to familiarize yourself with the content and then either take a diagnostic or the mock test, right? Your first mock test, it tells you your score, and based on that score, you can make some decisions. First, if you're scoring less than 535, 525, it means you really have to work on a lot of the basics. It also means that your autonomy is not really high. So basics of algebra, basics of math, arithmetic, addition, subtraction, division. The description below, I'll add some links to resources you can use to develop those foundations, to improve your autonomy. And once you do that, you can begin to learn the GMAT concepts. And once you improve your understanding of the concepts, you can begin to solve the official guide. Now notice what I did in the video when I was using the concepts. They're not many, by the way. There's a few. The ones that I used in the problem were number properties, arithmetic, number properties, the basic ones, number properties, averages, and rates. But you really have to know them inside out. You really have to know them really, really well. When you're preparing for the GMAT, you may be overwhelmed with the amount of material that you have to study, but remember, the concepts are relatively few. There's a lot of overlap, but the idea is that you have to master them. And the analogy is that you're going to have a conversation with someone. It is not about the fact that you know the grammar. It is not about the fact that you know the vocabulary. It is about having arguments, having discussions. And so those concepts, those ideas have to be assimilated very well. Okay, so if your first mock test doesn't go really well, if it's below that score, you really need to work on your foundations and you have to work on your autonomy. You can do that by taking a course in the basics of math or reaching out to a tutor. You can reach out to me, and that is the foundation that you have to build. And that's where everybody's different. It may take more time than you expect, and it really depends on what you've studied in university and the kind of work that you've done in the past. And so once you've understood the concepts, then you can proceed to solve the official GMAT guide. Okay, when you're solving the guide for the first time, that big bulky guide, I recommend when we talk about quant now, you want to solve the questions first by topic. So if you look over here in this error log, and I'll post a link in the description where you can download a copy of this error log for yourself, I recommend that you first solve the questions by topic. Okay, properties of numbers, operations of integers, ratio, there's percents, there's rates. Solve them by topic, but first solve only easy, medium. And the idea is you want to get a feel for how you're required to apply the concepts, apply the basics of math to solve those problems. And once you've done that first pass, then go back and solve the difficult problems. But again, you only do that if you feel like you have a high level of autonomy. If you're struggling, if you really ask so many whys, if you're looking at solutions and you think, I just don't know why I have to take that step, stop and consult a tutor or go back and learn and improve your understanding of the basics of math. But if you, after solving the easy, medium by topic, you realize that you understand what you have to do most of the time, then you can proceed to solve the difficult problems again by topic. And once you do that, then you can access your official guide online on mba.com, and then you can solve timed drills of all difficulty levels, easy, medium, hard. When you do it on that online interface, there's a newness to the questions that's going to be extremely valuable. And when you do that, you really recap your errors, you work on your efficiency, and you prepare for the conditions of solving under timed conditions on an online platform. And then when you do that, take mock test 2. If you see progress, then you can solve the extra guides. And the goal when you're solving these extra guides is to improve efficiency. Okay, you're working on efficiency. And to improve your efficiency, you have to try to do more with less. So you have to work on your economy and writing. And that is where also a tutor can really help you identify places where you can close your gaps in reasoning and improve. And you have to remember that this can be tough because you're changing habits, and as adults, habits are hard to change. So it requires patience, a lot of introspection, and taking the time to review your errors. And then once you do that, again, check autonomy. If you have a lot of autonomy, then proceed to the next step. And then you can take mock test 3. If you feel like you're close to the target score and you're close to that high quant score that you want, then you can book the test. Then you can repeat all the medium and hard problems in those extra guides again, and then take mock test 4. As you prepare then after mock test 4 for the real test, I recommend that you do short drills of no more than maybe 5 to 10 questions per set to again do that really fast recap, fast review, to identify mistakes, to identify bad habits, and to really work on your efficiency. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope it helps you understand what it is that is required to be a good problem solver, how to make the most out of your official GMAT resources. If you have any questions, or if you feel like I missed something in this video that I should have covered, please feel free to comment below.